Hey guys, welcome to Tall Tales with Taco Bell. This may be my last show on YouTube. I am doing a three-part series that I feel needs to get out there. If my shows all of a sudden disappear because they don't like the reference to COVID jabs, I've already had one of the programs removed. I am going to be transferring all of my stuff over to Rumble. And if you want to follow me at Rumble, I would love to have you join. Right now, it's frustrating. It's frustrating because I see so many things wrong in our military that cover all these different pillars. Distrust of our leadership, CRT training, infiltrating Marxist ideas, infiltrating our military, where we're basically endorsing hating the Constitution, which we're sworn to protect and defend, to compliance and coercion overtaking a mandated experimental use drug, which is the COVID jab. With us tonight, I've got two outstanding Marines that are willing to come talk about their experiences. Their experiences do not reflect the opinions or those of the DoD or the United States Marine Corps, but both of these gentlemen are lieutenant colonels who have served numerous, and I mean numerous, I'm talking like 7 months out of whack, 3 tours over in Iraq or Afghanistan, flying helicopters, getting shot at by bad guys. As a matter of fact, we're just talking about Gunshot 66, which was shot down by a surface-to-air missile in 2005, November, when I was in Al Taqaddum as the assistant air boss there. Very dangerous job. And yet now what is the military doing to these individuals that have bled, sacrificed, watched their friends die? It's atrocious. And, I'm not going to be a very popular fella on LinkedIn. And if you guys on LinkedIn, I have a lot of GO officers who are friends of mine or know me. Guys, I'm not happy. And I'm retired. So I'm going to raise the bullshit flag. This needs to be brought out. This stuff needs to be fixed. And it can only get fixed from within. So hopefully showing this is the third in the series. This will be the final one, and maybe something will get done. Well, without further ado, I'd like to bring Dan Holster Lewis on and Hank Hortenstein. How are you, gentlemen?
Doing well, Taco. Thanks for having us.
Good afternoon, Taco. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you heard my introduction. This will probably get pulled off. It'll be my last show on YouTube or Facebook. I'm sure they'll figure out a way to ban me or shadow ban me or whatever they do. But if it happens, it happens. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about you guys just real quick. Give everybody a little bit of background. Helicopter platform, tours in the war. Go ahead, Holster. You first.
Okay, thanks. First of all, apologies for the voice. I've got coaching duties, so I'm screaming at kids, 4 or 5 times a week and constantly hoarse. So apologies for that. So prior enlisted, Amtracker, turned legal chief, went to OCS in 2005, flight school, got Cobras West Coast. First squadron was Scarface, deployed over there for Marja. And got a FAC tour after that on the 11th MU, and then did a MARSOC tour in Afghanistan in 14 as part of SOTF 81.3. Switched to UAS, the RQ-7 Shadow. Didn't go to RQ-21 Blackjack or MQ-9, although I've been working both those programs in the Pentagon since 2018. But I did take RQ-7 over to the Philippines in 2016, right when ISIS-P was going up. So we got VME-3, 4 deployments back to back over there. So I've never been in one spot. Kind of jumped around, and third generation Marine. Thanks for having me.
Hoorah! How about you, Brokeback?
Hey, Taco. So I'm also a skid guy. OCS 2003, and went to flight school. Selected the Huey. Went to the West Coast as well. HMLA 169 Vipers, and did all my deploying time with the Vipers, 3 back-to-back, Iraq, Afghanistan. Left the fleet, actually came here to Yuma. I'm in Yuma again, but it's been Yuma back in 2010 to 13, flying search and rescue. Also got my feet wet on the fixed wing side of things, flying the C-12 or the King Air at that time, and then picked up a transition over to the C-9. Went out to Cherry Point and flew the DC-9 for about 3 years, all over the world. Good mission. Kind of got my foot in the door with what would have been the Marine Corps adoption of the C-40, the 737, but that did not develop very quickly, and I got kind of stranded out in MAG 41 as an active duty guy, Fort Worth, in a reserve command, and then eventually got scooped up and back here in Yuma flying C-12s again, the King Air, and that's what brings me into present day. Been back here in Yuma for about a little over 3 years now. What was always intended to be my Twilight tour, that though I did not project Twilight to look like it has turned out to look.
Well, I wish you were still at MAG 41, because I would walk you right down the street and get you on with American in about a heartbeat, you know.
Yeah.
And as we talked about, I know you're a Delta legacy, so we'll get you hooked up with some way to get on with Delta. And Hank, you want to come back to Fort Worth? You just let me know.
Roger. Thank you, Taco.
All right. Hey, Hank, what was the progression of the mandates, and how did that kind of affect in the command?
So when I came back to Yuma in 2019, I served as the installation OPSO, director of ops, for about 2 years, and then I moved on up and I was the base XO. That would have been summer of 21. So that was right about the time, June 21, July 21, when the mandate was not in place yet, but the writing was on the wall and we could see it coming. There are a few things that did not sit well with me at that time, and credit where credit is due. I'll say that, being tied up in standard Marine officership, your staff duties plus flying, there are some things that rise to capture your attention, and some things that you understand maybe you're not paying enough attention to, but you just don't have time for it. And I'll say that this was one of those things right off the bat for me. It was actually my wife that it tripped her warning flags before it tripped mine. And I started paying a little extra attention also. And ultimately at that time, what really didn't sit well with me was just a fundamental disagreement between truth and lies. And also, I didn't think that as this thing developed the way it was developing, that it jived well with the oath that I took to support and defend the Constitution. And I was in a particularly hairy spot, so to speak, as an XO. It's supposed to be a confidant and counselor, so to speak, to a commanding officer, and also typical XO duties. You become an enforcer when things aren't going right, and Marines, and in this case civilians, need discipline, because over 1,000 civilians actually answer to the command that I was part of. Mm-hmm. So, I had a basic, what I thought was warranted, appropriate man-to-man conversation, actually several of them, with the CO, telling him, sir, this is where I see things going, and this is where I stand from an individual perspective, and how that will translate over to me and my XO duties. And, one of the things I said early on was, I don't see myself being a participant here, and I also can't be party to punishing Marines that find themselves similarly aligned. So having open conversations with the CO and, in fact, the chaplain, as the religious accommodation piece started to come into focus, several developments occurred, one of which for myself in particular, on the religious side of things. Initially, that was not my first take. My first take was infringement upon my oath. And again, the fundamental problem with truth versus lies. But, the more I talked about it with the chaplain, the more I talked about it with my own pastor, it became very clear that, fundamentally, that is a conflict with my Christian worldview. Certainly.
How so? How did you guys, you and your wife, come to this?
So fundamentally, truth. The truth will set you free. You know, the truth versus lies absolutely has a solid foundation in the Bible and the Word. Additionally, regarding my oath, you know, the oath that we all took as military officers, support and defend the Constitution, I looked at it as, you know, America was founded on principles and values that are in full alignment with Christian virtue. And how could I support and defend the Constitution when I turn my back against it? And fundamentally, again, I'm turning my back on those very principles and virtues found in my family's Christian roots that I'm sworn to protect, you know, completely aside from the obligations of my faith. So it became very clear that absolutely that was fundamentally a Christian-based objection for me, and thereby appropriate to submit my own accommodation request. So this was after several face-to-face conversations, trying to work within the system, so to speak. I submitted my own accommodation on September 8th. On September 10th, that was the last time I flew an aircraft, so in the Marine Corps. So it's now been over a year, and I was grounded by virtue of a piece of message traffic that came out from our commanding general that said anybody that was going to fly his aircraft would be vaccinated. So that occurred 2 days after I submitted my own accommodation. I was one of two at that time that I'm aware of active duty pilots that it actually affected. And I continued to serve as the XO. I had a couple other additional conversations with the commanding officer. And what he eventually told me was, you know what, I'm just going to fall in line. And that's a quote, him speaking of himself, not of me, but him speaking of himself. I'm just going to fall in line. I felt it pertinent to also get on the record and present some of my concerns via email. So there was actually a record of it. I did not do this in a public fashion. This was to a very few key select individuals, to include the commanding officer himself, the sergeant major, the SJA, the military lawyer, and the medical chief, the officer in charge of the medical clinic. So this was not a public blast by any means, but just, you know, citing the problems with that I foresaw coming, and also what at that time was a giant ambiguity as to whether the shots being offered were even able to be mandated. Were they actually FDA approved? And they were in fact not. Which means that per 10 U.S. Code 1107 Alpha, they cannot be mandated. At that time, that was a strong suspicion. As time passed, we came to know that was absolutely a fact and true, and remains true today, quite frankly. So anyway, those concerns were expressed. I stayed in that position until November 1st, and I was removed from the XO position. I have not actually had any billet whatsoever since. Virtually zero responsibilities, no flying, no leadership, no supervision, nothing of the sort. And I'm on my fourth rejected retirement request now. So I don't see an end in sight for that at this time. In a normal world, I could be executing my terminal leave plan here in about 4 weeks, but not without achieving an approved retirement date by which I'm blocked because of a legal hold flag in my records.
Well, what about, go back, when you sent that email out, what was the reaction or reply from the medical staff? Oh yeah, we've got the correct stuff. Did they tell you that, or did they say, no, concur, we do not?
So a little bit of extra background there. This was not Hank coming up with his own personal interpretation of medical facts or legal facts or federal law or anything of that sort. This was actually what spurred me to speak up personally on the subject was certainly some independent research, but also the specific opinions from both our higher headquarters lawyer, military lawyer, SJA from MCIOS, and our local military SJA from MCS Yuma. One, drawing into light the question, and two, offering one of them offering his legal opinion that in fact, yes, it would appear that anybody that claims that this cannot be mandated based on 10 U.S. Code 1107 Alpha would have a very strong legal defense, and they're probably right. So that was, a military lawyer opinion that I regurgitated in my own words, so to speak, and said, "Sir, I think this is a problem. I think this is a liability issue, not just from a legal perspective for ourselves, but also, we're very greatly risking the trust and confidence of those Marines and civilians that we lead." So the response was basically mum. There was no response via email. They refused to be on the record, but the response was in person that I've heard enough. I'm going to fall in line.
God, how about you, Holster?
Yeah, so I'll just say up front, I was lucky that I was at headquarters and not in the fleet. I've been at headquarters Marine Corps Aviation since 2018, representing UAS on behalf of the Marine Corps. And I appreciate you handling the legalese up front there, Taco, so I don't have to say it. Yeah, Hank's story is exactly kind of what I heard coming back from the fleet from a lot of people that were in our boat, in terms of seeing by the time the mandate hit, knowing enough and seeing enough that we needed to pump the brakes and say, hang on. MLG having a shot X where you were 86 or 92 if you didn't show up, leave or called. And this was a week or two after the mandate dropped. So first or second week of September. This means no Marine in that command got a chance to put in an RFRA if they even knew what it was.
Explain what that is to the folks listening.
So the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, I believe it was passed in 93. It essentially codifies statutorily your First Amendment right. We all know that we're under the UCMJ, and we all know that serving in the military, we protect the Constitution. We don't necessarily get to be protected by it in total, and when we're serving in uniform until afterwards. I think the fallacy of the cliche that I heard growing up was we defend democracy, we don't practice it. Well, we're not a democracy, right? We're a constitutional republic. So the RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, allows for an individual to have a accommodation request routed up through, whether it's the executive branch or whatever part of the government you're in. For us, DOD, say, hey, I've got a conflict, and this isn't a Christian thing. This is, there's a recent case of an approval for, I think, a Sikh to have his beard,
right.
And he's a captain, right? And he did that through RFRA. And I will tell you, unfortunately, there are people that were trying to use that as a hypocrisy thing. It's like, no, man, that dude won his case, and we should celebrate that, and we should pile on top of it all of these other things that we're trying to do from a Christian worldview, like Hank was saying, and let, whether it's Jewish or Hindu or Sikh or Viking or Wiccan, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's not about being Christian, but these accommodation requests essentially say, you're trying to put something into my body, and we can set the legal thing aside and medically aside for right now, just from a religious box. Kind of what Hank was saying. You're going to put this in my body, and whether it was the aborted cell tissue issue, whether it was the suspected and then eventually kind of confirmed mRNA gene therapy issue, whatever it was that the individual objected to, they can have that routed up. And in the meantime, you're administratively held from being punished. While Hank was having his routed up, he probably shouldn't have been fired, but it's understandable that he can't be in a command position like an XO or a CO. That's understandable.
Right.
But withholding promotions, withholding PCSs, some of those punitive things, those things aren't supposed to happen when you're on admin hold. Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, depending on the MAR admin and what timing you're talking about. All of those accommodations came back no. And we can talk about that if you want. I don't have firsthand knowledge; it's more second and third hand. But essentially, the, um, all of the notice letters that went back to the Marines, like myself, that said your request is denied. You could put mine, Hank, just about everybody's next to each other, and it was a copy letter that was signed, and who it was to was changed, and that was about it. So that was an issue that was addressed early on, and I think that that was the basis of some of the holds on involuntary separations at ADSEP boards. The preliminary injunction that just came down from the Marine Corps from any ADSEPs going forward for the class, which is anyone that's been put in for RFRA, had an appeal denied, is part of that class that's protected now based on Judge Merriday's decision. And
So
then,
what about the 3,000 Marines that were sept, that were admin sept?
that's a good question, and I would hate to be the one that has to answer it, because to Hank's point, there was never, and the documents from the medical companies themselves state this, they were never going to make Comirnaty, not in America. It was never going to be distributed here. So everyone that got punished for not taking the only thing that was available, which is the emergency use authorized BioNTech shot from the Pfizer perspective, the Moderna shot, which was not Spikevax from that perspective, and J&J, which was never FDA approved. So I don't know what that means. Restitution, come back. Do they have standing for suit? You know, that's above my pay grade. But I got to tell you that if hindsight's 2020, I would think that there is a very strong legal and civil argument that those Marines were unlawfully involuntarily separated, and based on that is why consultation with my family, we didn't push it as far as a lot of Marines have. I pushed it to the point where I would start the board of inquiry process right up until that day. And then on that day, I had to take the J&J just to stay in compliance, coerced against my my better judgment. Said, you know, I didn't give informed consent. I didn't. At the same time, you do, because they're going to put the needle in your arm. But that was our decision. So I'm still in good standing based on current things. But if I was scared if they were going to mandate the booster, what does that mean? Because they did all of this based on an interchangeability argument from a BUMED memo signed by a 1-star. The Secretary of Defense's mandate is lawful, the way it is written. It is
Right.
lawful. The MAR admin that came down from the Commandant is lawful. Everything that went into enforcement was not. And that was based on what they had available to them and the fact that they used an interchangeability argument, which was against the BLA and the FDA approved language that Comirnaty and Spikevax were legally and administratively different than the EUA, even though they were chemically the same.
Mhm.
They were legally and administratively distinct, which means legally and administratively, which is what we're talking about with ADSEPs and religious accommodation requests. They should have been treated as such.
So when you say it came down from higher headquarters and that the order was lawful,
Yes.
was it lawful in the sense that if you declined and didn't want to take it because it's experimental use authorization?
That's what I'm saying. It was lawful for them to say that you need to take an FDA approved vaccine,
Right.
or you can choose to voluntarily take an EUA product. That was in the language.
So technically you had the choice of not taking it, but you still had to take it. And if you didn't take it, then you got admin set.
It's the enforcement regime that was unlawful. The enforcement regime of not allowing Marines the time to seek medical advice from whether it's their flight surgeon. Because here's the other thing. I mean, if you ever heard of somebody called Lieutenant Colonel Teresa Long, she can tell you about how this affected the Army aeromedically, and she's a flight surgeon. And you know, you're talking about American Airlines. My dad's in Delta. FAA has regulations on this that you don't stick every single one of your pilots with an experimental substance and then just throw them back in the cockpit and say they're good to go. That is
Yeah.
not how aeromedical works. So we were coloring way outside the lines on all kinds of things. But in fairness, there's a lot of people that were under the gun, and this was all happening very, very fast. I mean, the FDA approval came 1 day before the mandate dropped.
Wait a minute. So you're saying which one got FDA approval?
The FDA approval came, I think, for Pfizer first. I don't remember off the top of my head. It was either both Pfizer and Moderna at the same time, or Moderna came very quickly after, within a couple months. But
Yeah.
both of those. Go ahead, Hank.
Sorry, August 23rd was the FDA approval of a product made by Pfizer known as Comirnaty. August 24th was the DoD mandate, and I think the Moderna product named Spikevax received approval sometime in January, something like that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But those are still not being distributed to our service members.
No. And the DoD mandate, as Holster indicated, the language from the top was very specific and legal in that it said, you are hereby ordered to take an FDA licensed and approved product.
Right.
Knowing full well there was no such product available. And as that order trickled down from the Secretary of Defense to Secretary of Navy to the Marine Administrative Message, the language was identical because they knew what they had to put in writing to stay safe. But clearly the directives that were initiated at the ground level, at the individual unit command level, were, we don't care what the product is, they need a shot. But wait a minute, the only shots available are emergency use authorized. Doesn't matter, we don't care, they need to take it. Well, the big distinction is you can't mandate such a shot legally. But that's exactly what was happening in practice.
So all these guys that are getting the shot. Well, let's go back. I refused to take the shot. Well, in my company, if you refuse to take the shot, you got Section 21 hearings, administrative firing. They had a date set. Buddy of mine, he's a Coast Guard guy. He went right up to that thing. I sat there with my wife and we talked about it. I go, you guys, we've already had the full 2-week COVID. We had it the second time. I'll take the J&J, which is least offensive to me. You guys don't get the shot. You already have antibodies from this thing. But I had too much money on the table and career left, 7 years, to throw that away because nobody else would hire me because the government mandated everybody get it. And that's what ticks me off is a coercion issue of this. If I had voluntarily wanted this, awesome. Give me 2 doses, give me 6 doses, and I'll end up still getting this common cold now, COVID, no matter what, which is not common cold, but it's kind of mutating into that, right? It's still going around. Everybody's still getting it. The military side of it, the thing that really bothers me the most is you gentlemen have served this country. You've sacrificed away from your family for 3 tours, 4 tours, and there are people out there that did 7 tours, 8 tours. I mean, it's just crazy to me. And now you turn around and you go, oh, don't pass go, don't collect $200 if you don't take this shot. So now let's talk about the administrative side of this effect that this is having on our service members. You know, in the name of readiness, we're destroying our readiness by kicking all these folks out. Hank, you had a guy who, well, first of all, in your case, you're on the ODN, which is Officer Disciplinary, and you're in the black book up at the Commandant's office, right?
Right. Yep. So I submitted my accommodation. It was denied around about December of 21. By virtue of RFRA and the Marine Corps order that trickles down from RFRA, you're able to submit an appeal. I submitted my appeal. My appeal was denied in February of February this year, 22. And then you're issued a rubber meets the road, so to speak, final order, go get a shot. My specific order, my command here locally got the word on the legal language to use and kept themselves in the green by saying, go get an FDA licensed and approved shot. It also had in it a paragraph that said, if medical supply is insufficient and you cannot locate the product, document accordingly, utilize your chain of command to assist, and turn that documentation in to me, the CO. So that's what I did. I went over to the clinic, took pictures of everything they had. I had a good working relationship with the clinic OIC, so he opened the freezer door for me. It was very, very personable and easy. It just so happened that on a second visit there with my command witness in tow, we also interfaced with the guy that's responsible for ordering all products in that clinic. And he said, take a look at my computer screen here. Here's what's even available to be ordered. There's no box even labeled Comirnaty. It's the products and only the products that you see in that freezer right there, all marked emergency use authorized. So I documented, I took photos, I took statements, and I turned that in accordance with the order that I received. And that was completely ignored. The next thing I heard was approximately 8 days later, you are on with the commanding general via SVTC, so a secret video teleconference, to be counseled and punitively counseled and receive a page 11 in your records for disobeying a lawful order. I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, I obeyed the letter, I obeyed the order to the letter exactly as it's written here. But that's what happened. And then I was issued a what's called a report of misconduct. It's basically the commanding general officially documenting that you're being cited for Article 92 violation.
Well, take me to court martial. Where's the little thing that says I request court martial?
Right. So by virtue of this is not an NJP, this is headed towards a board of inquiry. So per the UCMJ, that is an administrative process only, quote unquote, non-punitive administrative only. You don't even have the right to elect to have a court martial in lieu of the punishment because it's, quote, administrative only. Right. Now, I do know a lot of guys that actually did request court martial, and that was ignored. Anyway, that was back in March, and that paperwork traveled and ultimately got up to MCICOM, Marine Corps Installations Command. So the final stage where the show cause authority could actually initiate the board of inquiry to effect my separation, and it sat there for over 3 months with no action before the court injunction in federal court occurred. So that's been my experience, all the while without a billet, not flying, nearing retirement. And by virtue of being on that officer disciplinary notebook, there's a legal hold flag in your records that won't even allow you to have a retirement request processed, and lots of other things. But that's the one that's directly affecting me.
Well, let's say that they retired you.
Mm-hmm.
And they gave you a general discharge under honorable conditions. Can they do that?
So that's a question I've asked. I'm not aware of an actual retirement with a pension that has a characterization that's not honorable. But however the discharge occurs, per the NDAA this year, National Defense Authorization Act, so Congress, the floor was set for COVID separations, floor for characterization at general under honorable. So per law passed by Congress, no one for this reason can get anything less than a general. And for the many of those Marines that have been separated have received generals. It sounds innocuous, but it is not an honorable separation. And those Marines lose VA education benefits, so they lose their GI Bill. They lose some other key things, and they're also being given a reenlistment code that indicates serious misconduct.
felony misconduct.
Yeah, the equivalent thereof, and that's something at a minimum. That's something they have to explain to a future employer. But
That's
it
if they can get through the initial HR computer system, because if
Right.
it flags that code, they're just pass you on.
Yeah.
Unless you know somebody that gets you in the back door to at least explain.
And Taco, I want to jump in real quick because I want to hammer
Yeah.
down on something Hank said, and the premise to your question was, looking at this administratively, the court cases have been slam dunks one way. Legally, everyone from the federal government, whether it's the civilian force, everything tied to the mandates has been disseminated, or disseminated is the wrong word, but destroyed is probably too strong of a word. But I think they're owing for however many cases in court. This is why the DOD is not allowing court martials. They're not doing NJPs. They're saying Article 92 to push the paperwork, the administrative paperwork. And then I think they're doing commission of a serious offense as the basis for the admin set boards or the BOIs. And that was the thing that surprised me, was I was not sure how they were going to bring this administratively, just because you refused to do a shot that they can't really legally mandate that you take. It was an innocuous case, but that's how they've done it. And that misconduct code in the DD 214 coupled with the general is very debilitating for people's futures. So if those don't get corrected, and the Navy Board of Corrections is going to be backlogged with cases for years, trying to undo all of the harm that's been done to these Marines and sailors that have been separated involuntarily and punitively through this mandate.
Yeah, I mean, 3,000. I've heard 3,000. Hank, is that?
Yeah. So somewhere in the realm of 7,000 to 8,000 total separated from the DOD at large is the number that I have, and almost half of those have been Marines. So somewhere over 3,000 Marines have been separated.
Well, and that number, Hank, correct me if I'm wrong, that number you're pulling is active duty, right? That is active duty separations.
As best I understand, yes. And if you added reservists onto that, I don't know what it would be.
And that's what I was going to bring up, is that there was a friend of mine that did the path that we were talking offline, Taco, about how you get into the airline. She did it. She was involuntarily moved to the IRR out of the reserves. Are they counting those in those numbers? I don't think so.
Probably not.
So there's a whole nother slew. And this gets to I'm sure this is a good segue to the readiness conversation, but what we're losing on the aviation side, what we're losing on the leadership side, you're looking at two guys that were command slaveable, and two guys that probably wanted to be 05 commanders, and you know what that means. Mm-hmm. And I pulled my name out of the hat 2 years ago over this, and that was before the mandates and everything else. I saw where they were going and how they were doing this, and I couldn't represent the organization from a command perspective, and knowingly know that I'm going to walk into that job not being able to fulfill the duties they want me to fulfill. And so I just said, let's I can still do my job as a staff officer, and hopefully we can find some way to coexist. But after I got my denial back and I laid out all those things, I was willing to not get my promotion last year to lieutenant colonel and retire this year in December. I was willing to take an admin extension all the way to December and retire as a major. Marine Corps said no. Same thing that they're saying to Hank. We're not going to let you just walk away voluntarily, but we're also not going to let you do anything. So there's a lot of purgatory going on.
Well, what about
a lot of wasted talent?
Yeah. What about the guy that actually had his retirement date? Talk about that. A guy out on terminal leave now.
Yeah, so a friend of mine on the East Coast, Lieutenant Colonel, beyond 20 years, somewhere in the 21, 22 years of service range, was a commander. He was relieved of command. He had an approved retirement date on the books, and that retirement, the official retirement date to actually be listed on the retired list, is October 1st. So this week, Saturday. And thereby, he has been on terminal leave for many weeks already. In fact, he's already got a new job. He's been working that job. And he just got a call in the last few days from his command saying, it sounds like headquarters may be rescinding his retirement date. And in fact, he would not be retired.
And he
So
can't leave. So he's still on legal hold somewhere in the system.
presumably, I mean, if I started terminal leave, as we all presume, we're done. That's
Yeah.
it. We're just waiting on a piece of paper, effectively. But I even heard of a Marine officer that he had a signed, finalized DD-214 in hand, and was actually driving across the country from his duty station to his home of record with his family in tow, and was called by the administrative office, IPAC, and told, yeah, your DD-214 is being nullified. What do you mean? So, I can't vouch for the finality of either of those scenarios. I don't personally know, but there's some serious weirdness occurring, of course, and obviously it directly relates to my circumstances, because I still lack an approved retirement date. And what that tells me is if guys that have an approved date are actually in the execution process are being snatched back, well, I don't see my approval coming anytime soon.
And what about the headquarters Marine Corps Almar that came out?
So that message, it took about a month to be released after the injunction. Largely, it was a response to the injunction, which the injunction in federal court was on August 18th.
Mm-hmm.
The August 18th of this year, 2022. Designating a class of Marines as a protected class, certifying the class that you had to have submitted a religious accommodation request. That request had to have been denied. So that made you part of the class. And what the judge's order said was these Marines can't be kicked out. They can't be retaliated against for having exercised their constitutional and statutory rights under RFRA. And you can't continue to enforce the mandate on them, the shot mandate, or administrative processing, et cetera, for administrative separation. This message the Marine Corps released a month later acknowledged that injunction, regurgitated the judge's language, and in my view, then went on to specify how they were going to actually retaliate against some Marines, specifically Marines that had been selected for promotion, enlisted Marines. That promotion would be delayed for 12 months. So tell me how is that not retaliation? I don't know.
Yeah.
But,
that is.
Yeah. So it listed a few other details, specifics on officers that were not yet on the ODN. The disciplinary notebook would not be put on it. It talked about EAS, or end of active service, for Marines at the end of their contract. They would be allowed to separate, but it didn't talk about retirements at all. And it didn't talk about officers that were already on the ODN. So it left some giant holes of ambiguity. And for my particular circumstances, it basically said nothing.
Well, how many guys do you think were on that black book up at headquarters?
Well, I don't know what the number would be. Certainly in the realm of several hundred. So really, I think the question becomes, of the remainder of Marines that have not yet been attrited off of that original religious accommodation request list, attrited by virtue of having naturally gotten out of the service otherwise because they had great timelines, or coerced into taking a shot, or already separated, whatever that number is, in the several thousand for sure. How many of those are officers? Because that ODN, that officer disciplinary notebook, is only for officers. And if you never got to the stage of getting a finally denied appeal, you didn't make it onto the officer disciplinary notebook. So how developed was your own individual process and routing of your own paperwork when the mandate hit when the injunction hit is the real question. It's a bunch. It's certainly in the several hundreds range, but I don't know how many.
Well, when you had your conversation with the general, was it just a one-way ass chewing, or did you have a chance to go, hey, sir, look at this. I, in fact, have photographs of blah, 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 and they don't have what you're demanding me to take?
So I wouldn't characterize it as an ass chewing. It was certainly one way, but all it was him verbatim reading the page 11 on the screen and then effectively and asking me to sign it. I declined to sign it because there were factual errors on that piece of paper, and I was unwilling to put my name against those factual errors. But before that video teleconference occurred, I did have the opportunity to face-to-face interact with the commanding officer, who he was the one that gave me the order. The order was not from the general; it was from the CO. He said, "Hey, sir, as best I can tell, I complied with your order to the letter. So what's going on here?" And he said, "Well, the as far as I'm concerned, the interchangeability issue has already been resolved. As Holster alluded to, the DoD basically regurgitated the FDA comments that these shots are similar enough in makeup and interchangeable for the purposes of safety and efficacy. Oh, but by the way, the fine print down on the bottom said they are legally distinct." And just like Holster said, this is not a discussion of medical efficacy. This is a discussion of legality, because you are hanging UCMJ penalties over someone's head. That is a legal discussion. Legal distinction is the key issue here.
And one other thing to piggyback off of this, and the conversations that I've had up here, and I'll tell you, Taco, because I know you started the show off saying you're upset, and I said this to some, and they know who they are. I made it all the way to June. A lot of people didn't make it through September of last year. My wife and I were talking about the fight, and she said, if I would have told you when the mandate hit and you were putting your accommodation request together that you would make it all the way to June before they put the gun to your head. And that's the phrase I use. They put the gun to my head. They weaponized my family and my retirement. If I would have told you made it to June, would you be happy with that? And I said, yeah, because that would back in the fall with all this stuff coming, and Hank, you remember the climate back then. I mean, it was very clear top down. This is a leadership issue. Compliance, getting the needle, is a leadership issue, which basically implies to all of your generals and colonels, go get your people in line and get them the shot, because it wasn't a conversation, to Hank's point. They're not going to argue the legalities or the medical efficacy or anything else. They were told, this is the order. You either comply with it or not. And I don't want to be confused with facts that say that this is wrong. That's not the conversation we're having. The conversation we're having is simple yes or no, Marine. Are you going to do this or not? And so that's kind of the situation that we found ourselves in.
You know, it's funny too when you think about like the ships that were, oh my God, 3 people came down with COVID on the ship, and the ship is going nuts, and they've shut the ship down, and nobody could do, everybody's going to get this thing, and it's going to go through like wildfire through a unit. So knowing what we know now and knowing what we knew then, you had the point of being pretty scared, the fear of the unknown, right? But knowing what we know now, why are they still doing this? It's almost like Putin, getting his butt handed to him, and still just doesn't want to lose face. So he's going to keep fighting it. Just give up. There's got to be a point where we give up. We take care of the 7,800 people or 7,300 people that have been admin sept. We do right, make it right, and take care of the folks that have sacrificed. Because I guarantee you, you're going to have a hard time telling your kid, and you're going to have a hard time telling your kid or nephew, hey, you ought to join the Marine Corps. I had a great time in the Marine Corps. When, they're willing to sacrifice and not honor the legalities of certain things. You know what I mean? It's not like they were demanding that we go kill a bunch of people in some My Lai massacre. It's not like that at all. But they're given an order that they know is not right, but they're still fighting it. Anything up at headquarters, Marine Corps, or headquarters up there in DC? What's the talk or a scuttlebutt around the coffee pot?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I had that conversation with my dad, who is a Marine, talking about my cousin enlisting, and this was a year ago. I couldn't recommend it based on the environment. It's not just this. I mean, this is a symptom And I think you talked about at the beginning of the show of what the larger disease is that this is a symptom of. Um, I think we're at the point right now is that without significant leadership changes, they're going to continue to push forward with this because for whatever reason, and it's illogical, and so it makes people like us heads hurt. But for whatever reason it is, they're not going to back off of this.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm increasingly concerned because I never thought the FDA approval would come. I also never thought that they would be able to pull off an interchangeability bait and switch maneuver either. So, there's things that we learned along the way. I don't know if they're going to get away with that with a booster regime, but I am concerned that this recruitment issue that we have, this retention issue that we have, the numbers that touched on this, we'll never know. But they're in the tens of thousands. I guarantee you, they're in the tens of thousands of people that left the service on one way or another because of this specific issue that you're talking about.
All right. You know what? Let's circle back. CRT. How have you guys had command stand downs now that the last 2 years with the current POTUS? Have you all had command stand downs so that we can talk CRT? I mean, have they done that God knows we had command stand downs at Quantico when I was up at MCRIC, and it was a weekend sexual assault, all hands stand down. And we'd been in the base theater for 8 hours watching videos, and I couldn't take it anymore. It was horrendous, but I'm sure it's even worse now. Do you guys have any sort of has it I'm lost for words. Have you guys endured stand downs that are promoting these CRT sort of issues?
Certainly. I'll make it slightly broader than stand down. So that type of agenda has been pushed through many avenues, be it stand downs in person, PowerPoint, you got to review this PowerPoint presentation, whatever. And I'll also add that it's not been limited to the timeline of this administration. In fact, that stuff, CRT specific, started flowing down, as I recall, during President Trump's tenure. And the reason I remember that is because at one point, President Trump said, this stuff will stop. This stuff will not occur.
He put a stop to it, actually.
Right.
Was on the tail end of Obama, right? So then Trump.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when, but he was very specific about what would stop within all federal agencies. And I saw some more of it come down. And it was in the form of a PowerPoint presentation after that. So I personally threw a flag based upon the president's standing order, and it's also personally offensive. But I reported that to congressional representatives, and I'm not saying I personally had any effect whatsoever, but I did not see anything additional of that variety come down afterwards until post-election, and then it accelerated dramatically for sure. And frankly, I think all the COVID stuff is related to the CRT, and they're all pushing for a similar end state.
I don't get it. I had a comment on somebody's post on LinkedIn, which is more professional, not a Facebook. You know what I mean? And on LinkedIn, I wrote, this guy wrote this whole thing about, he was in the Army. He witnessed all the, we got to get rid of all the neo-Nazis. And I just put in there, I view with great concern the fact that you even throw out the term neo-Nazis. You've already lost your argument, because in 29 years in the Marine Corps, I never ran into a KKK guy at the O Club or a neo-Nazi on the weekends out drinking beer with his buddies and, having a big burn. Yeah, I never saw that stuff. And I think people are throwing around a lot of terms that are help destroying our institution, which should be apolitical. It should be apolitical. The military, the Marine Corps was always great. I thought, hey, we're all green. We bleed red, but we're all green. And you are promoted on the values you bring to the institution. You're awarded a merit. You get a Navy comm. You really did a great job. It doesn't matter, black, white, Indian, Martian. You did a great job, Marine. Let's take care of you. And we take care of our Marines. But right now, the demonstrations of taking care of our Marines and our soldiers and sailors and airmen are kind of lacking. And I'm out, so I can say that. You guys, there are a lot of things I'm sure you would like to say, but I don't want you to, because I don't want your commands to get mad at you. As a matter of fact, I do appreciate you all taking the time to come out here and talk about what is affecting you. And I'm going to ask this: is there any legal recourse, congressional, Hank, anything that can help your case, or have the congressman said, "Hey, hands up in the air, we can't do anything to help you out"?
Well, at this stage of the game, I'm kind of come full circle in that regard. I initially reached out to 6 different representatives. I got a bite from one. That did result in an inquiry from that representative's office on my behalf to the DOD. I would say it ran its course, but from my view, its course was pretty trifling, so to speak. It took several months, but ultimately resulted in no answers. And the final result was me being contacted by that representative's office and being told that we can't do anything to help. And I asked why, and I didn't get any response. So I think it became politically inconvenient to continue to pull that thread, frankly.
It's just amazing to me. You've got no recourse.
Yeah. So, I'm not a activist. Appearing in any public venue in any way, shape, or form is not something that I jump to ever. But when you run out of recourse within your chain of command and within the orders and regulations that are set forth, such as Marine Corps order that comes from RFRA, and all these avenues that you have at your disposal, to include the IG system, the Inspector General. I had a report to both USMC IG and DOD IG that were 6 months later. Finally, I was told we're not even going to investigate this. So having utilized every avenue available, you're left with public attention. And I say that from a perspective of not trying to help my own personal circumstances, but the American people deserve to know what's going on within their own Department of Defense. And all those tens of thousands of service members out there deserve a voice. And, what little I can do to put some details out there, I find appropriate and helpful to the cause at large.
Well, I appreciate both of you guys, because the fact that you are a senior lieutenant colonel, field grade officer, the young corporal or sergeant, they don't have that voice. The staff sergeant, he doesn't have that voice, So thank you guys for coming out and being willing to be on camera and talk about your situation.
Thank you, Taco.
Yeah.
Thank you, Taco.
Is there anything that you guys saved around you guys want to talk about?
I want to wrap up, and I apologize if I was like a ping pong ball answering some of these questions.
No, you guys
were a lot of information and knowledge and research, as Hank was saying. We've been in the trenches on this for the last 2 years plus. I will say that for recourse, a smarter man than me said that we are a nation of political will, not a nation of laws. So the political will has to be there for Congress to start getting something going. And Congress is going to get something going when the attention is drawn. And this is part of that attention draw. I will tell you from personal experience that the amount of congressmen a year ago that we had willing to listen to us was probably, you could count on one hand. And now they're in the dozens. So, and you see that within the service as well, is that people who in 2021, in February or March, as soon as they made the shots available, took them, and all of a sudden now they're like, "Whoa, what did I do?" I didn't even think. There's a lot of good, if you want to call it, awakening going on, as part of this. And so it might not be, and this is why I took it. It's not about me. It's about the corporal or the sergeant or the future enlistee or my kid being able to go through school without taking it, or my wife being able to get TRICARE without taking it. That was the point. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
Yeah, anytime. I tell you what, maybe we'll have our follow-up on Rumble, because I probably won't be on any of my platforms after I air all 3 of these shows. This is being recorded, by the way, which I will play 1, 2, 3, and boom, boom, boom. So we'll see how long Tall Tales with Taco Bell will actually be around. It may have to Google it. Google will ban me, and you have to go Duck Duck Goose and find my show on Rumble, because I think that's where I'm going to migrate to. Gents, I've laid this out before, and I'll say it again. To any aviator or mechanic that hears the sound of my voice and says, you're getting screwed, you want to get out. Well, when you get out, you track me down. I will do everything in my power to get you a job, to get you taken care of, to feed your family. If you're a mechanic, we'll get you hired on as a mechanic. If you're an aviator, we'll get you the time. If you're a helicopter, we'll get you the fixed wing time. We got programs, scholarships. We have all sorts of stuff. RTAG, rtag.org. Great program, great group of guys, charity. We'll get you in the door and through the back door and every door that we have to get you guys taken care of, whether it be private. We have connections through private, commercial, or contractor doing ISR in a King Air, making big bucks somewhere. We can find you a job and take care of you. Trust me. Holster, I do have behind me. Can you see that propeller right there? It's hard to see.
Yeah, it looks like it's either a Pioneer or a Shadow.
It's a Pioneer.
It's a Pioneer.
So
okay.
When I was at TQ, we had VMU2 there. Those guys would give me the old propellers that didn't spin up fast enough, the RPMs, and they were brand new. And so I'd send them to people and get boxes of cigars that I'd go take care of the Marines. But yeah, man, I'm thinking about you, because that's your UAV predecessor. But anyway, we'll get you so you're not flying UAV somewhere. You're flying, making good money. And I can throw that out there. I will do everything in my power, gentlemen.
Thanks, Taco.
Yeah.
Good money to be had in both fields, Taco. We'll be all right.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm gonna drop you off for a second. Don't go anywhere. Say goodbye, and then I think we're gonna have a follow-up. I think we need to have a follow-up in just a few months to find out where are you now, type thing. You know what I mean? Maybe some issues happen that get you guys mitigate this. All right. I'm going to drop you off, gentlemen. Can't thank you enough. Folks, that was 2 very brave Marines to come on and talk about their situation, their active duty. It's not easy, because as a commanding officer, somebody's going to get a hold of it and they could try to use it against them. It's not about activism. It is about doing what's right. So please, if you guys are listening to me out there and you happen to be old peers of mine, you might have been in TBS back in '88 and you happen to have a star on your shoulder, do me a favor, do the right thing. Be the guy that tells the president he's not wearing clothes. The emperor's not wearing clothes. And take care of our folks, because I'll tell you right now, if you don't take care of our folks, we're not going to have the people to replace you, the people to replace me, and everybody else. So let's get this fixed. All right. Until I see you guys on Rumble, I'm sure, because this may be canceled. Adios, hasta luego, se wiedersehen, tschüss. Take care.